The sun was just beginning to dip behind the jagged horizon of Uganda's Murchison Falls National Park, its fiery glow reflecting off the Nile River as the jungle chorus of insects grew louder. Rangers searching for Sophia Koetsier, a young Dutch medical student who had vanished hours earlier, pushed through the thick undergrowth. What they discovered didn't look like the remnants of a wild animal attack. Her purse and shoes were neatly placed on the ground. Her underwear was found hanging, inexplicably, 5 meters high in a tree, as though someone had deliberately arranged it. It was a scene that didn't make sense, and yet, within days, authorities would write her disappearance off as an animal encounter. But was it really? Or was something far more sinister concealed beneath the official reports? But before we begin, I want to thank my amazing viewers and subscribers for your support through your likes, shares, and comments. Your engagement helps make these stories more meaningful. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Sophia Koetsier was born in 1994 in the Netherlands into a supportive and academically driven family. Friends describe her as warm, bright, and endlessly curious. She was the kind of person who lit up a room not by being the loudest, but by being deeply attentive to those around her. By the age of 21, Sophia was studying medicine, a path she pursued with both determination and compassion. Her dream was to specialize in pediatrics, working with children, where she believed she could make the most meaningful impact. In letters to friends, she often wrote about wanting to bring healthcare to underserved parts of the world. She loved travel. She was fascinated by cultures beyond her own and believed that the truest form of learning happened outside the walls of the classroom. It was this drive that led her, in October 2015, to Uganda. She wasn't just a tourist. She wanted to experience the country's landscapes, its people, and its stories. Friends remember her enthusiasm as she packed for the trip. She talked about seeing the Nile, the thunderous beauty of Murchison Falls, and elephants grazing in tall grasses. It was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. No one could have imagined it would be her last. Sophia arrived in Uganda during the dry season, a time when the vegetation was thinner, and animals were easier to spot near watering holes. It was peak safari tourism. Witness accounts suggest she was traveling partly on her own, but often in small groups of other visitors. She was staying near the edges of Murchison Falls National Park, one of the country's largest and most famous wildlife reserves. For those unfamiliar, Murchison Falls isn't just a park. It's an untamed wilderness. Stretching across savanna, forest, and river delta, it's home to lions, elephants, hippos, crocodiles, and leopards. And at its heart, the Nile crashes through a narrow gorge, creating the thunderous Murchison Falls. But this beauty hides danger. Park officials routinely warn tourists never to wander off alone. Wild animals are unpredictable. Insects carry disease. And sometimes, crime seeps into the edges of the park, as poachers, smugglers, and opportunists roam the same paths as tourists. Sophia, by all accounts, was cautious. But she was also adventurous, eager to experience the raw authenticity of the place. Friends later recalled that in the days before her disappearance, she mentioned feeling watched while walking near the lodge area. Nothing overtly threatening, just an instinct that something wasn't right. Small warnings that in hindsight carry a chilling weight. On October 28, 2015, Sophia entered Murchison Falls National Park. Witnesses saw her near the river, exploring paths that weave into the forest. The weather was hot and humid, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and wild grass. She was last seen heading toward a trail not far from Paris Safari Lodge, a popular base for visitors. Several accounts conflict. Some say she appeared to be walking alone. Others believe she may have been accompanied briefly by a local guide. By late afternoon, she hadn't returned. Concern began to grow. Staff at the lodge noted her absence when dinner was served. When she still hadn't returned by nightfall, search efforts began. And soon after, strange discoveries were made. The search began with torches cutting through the darkness, the beams of light flickering over tangled vines and brush. The jungle at night is an orchestra of sound, crickets, distant roars, the unsettling rush of the Nile in the background. Rangers moved methodically, calling her name. Hours passed before the first clues appeared. Near a small clearing, they found her shoes, placed neatly together. Beside them was her purse, undisturbed, with personal belongings intact. A little further ahead, in a tree towering nearly 5 meters, a piece of clothing hung limply. Her underwear. It was an eerie scene, one that did not resemble the typical aftermath of a wild animal encounter. Predators don't remove shoes carefully. They don't suspend clothing in trees. And yet, that's what the searchers were confronted with. Despite this, no body was recovered. Sophia herself seemed to have vanished into thin air. Authorities documented the belongings. Photographs show the shoes together, undamaged. The purse's contents weren't scattered or chewed. Items remained in place. The underwear hanging from a tree was especially puzzling. To many it seemed staged. Rangers quietly whisper among themselves, uneasy with what they were seeing. Still, the official explanation leaned heavily toward wildlife. Some reports suggested that perhaps a large animal had startled Sophia, causing her to drop her belongings, and in the chaos, pieces of clothing were carried or thrown upward. But when pressed, experts admitted that predators don't typically behave in such ways. The lack of blood at the scene only deepened the mystery. No drag marks, no signs of a violent struggle in the soil. It was as if someone had wanted to leave behind a message rather than evidence. The Ugandan police opened an inquiry, though many locals quietly expressed skepticism about its depth. Murchison Falls has long been a sensitive area for tourism. Bad press can have devastating effects on the industry. Within days, the explanation given publicly was simple, a probable wild animal attack. But behind closed doors, whispers suggested otherwise. Privately, investigators noted inconsistencies. The staged appearance of belongings, the absence of a body, the unusual arrangement of clothing. Despite this, no suspects were identified. No arrests were made. And without a body, the case lacked the crucial evidence needed to move forward. Sophia's family flew to Uganda, desperate for answers. They pleaded for a more thorough investigation, for international cooperation, but doors closed quickly. The official story had already been written. There was never a trial in Sophia's case. Without suspects, without a body, without forensic breakthroughs, there was no courtroom to cross-examine what really happened in Murchison Falls. What remains are theories, whispers of foul play, a potential abduction, of a cover-up. Forensic specialists consulted later by independent journalists argued that the crime scene was inconsistent with an animal attack. They highlighted the deliberate placement of items, the absence of biological evidence, and the psychological element of hanging clothing in a tree something that felt almost ritualistic. But speculation could not substitute for a legal process. The case stalled indefinitely. There was no verdict, no sentencing, only an official line. Sophia Koetsier was presumed to have been attacked by wildlife in Murchison Falls National Park. For many, this explanation was unsatisfactory. It felt like a dismissal of glaring contradictions. Sophia's disappearance sent ripples through the international community. Dutch media covered the story extensively, pressing for answers. Friends and family organized vigils, remembering her as a bright soul taken far too soon. In Uganda, the incident quietly faded from headlines, absorbed into the background noise of other crises. But among locals and seasoned travelers, her story became a cautionary tale whispered with unease. For Sophia's parents, closure never came. They continue to carry the weight of unanswered questions, the hollow ache of not knowing what really happened to their daughter. To this day, her case remains unresolved, an uncomfortable reminder of how quickly lives can vanish, and how systems sometimes choose silence over truth. Audience engagement prompts. What do you think really happened to Sophia in Murchison Falls National Park? Was it truly a wild animal attack, or something more sinister? Do you believe authorities intentionally downplayed evidence to protect tourism? And most haunting of all, if Sophia's belongings were deliberately staged, who did it and why? And that brings us to the end of this case. A story so disturbing it leaves you questioning how many others are suffering in silence. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments. If this story shook you, there's more on the channel that dives into cases just as haunting. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video. It helps keep these stories from being forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.